but all right. Okay, let's get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gary Clark, President and CEO of Economic Alliance Snohomish County, and this is another Coffee Chats with Economic Alliance Snohomish County. We're really excited to have you all this morning. We have a potential amazing opportunity this morning, and I would love for you all to just buckle up your sofa seats or wherever you are and just chime in. We really would love for you to engage on the chat with this session. And so without further ado, we'll go to the next slide. And okay, so I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming several individuals that are here with us today who will join us in a panel conversation. And first and foremost, we have Annie Cole, Human Resources Policy Advisor and Office of Social Justice with Snohomish County. Annie, welcome. Good morning.
Good morning.
We also have very cool Doug Rayford, who is actually with Linwood, the city of Linwood, as their racial and social justice coordinator. Doug, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
And next, we also have Avianca Walker Louderman, who is actually the leader, one of the leaders of Black SNOCO. Avianca, welcome.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone.
And I believe we have another panelist that may join us, but I don't think Savannah is with us just yet, but we'll move on from there. All right, folks, let's dive in a little bit here. But before we do that, I want to give you a quick note. The Step Up 2022 Moving Racial Equity Forward is happening for Leadership Snohomish County. Save the date, August 29th, and actually April 29th, excuse me. And make sure that you are setting your calendar, you're ready to go. This is going to be an amazing opportunity for folks to engage. So again, Step Up 2022, Moving Racial Equity Forward. All right, folks, we have a great group here, and we have some engaging opportunities to discuss equity and diversity here. But before we do that, I would like each of you to take just a moment to give our audience a little bit of insight on who you are. So we'll start with Annie, we'll go to Avianca, and then Doug will close out with the intro. So take it away, Annie.
Good morning. My name is Annie Cole, and as Gary has already said, I work for Snohomish County Executive Dave Summers as HR Policy Advisor and part of the Office of Social Justice. We started the office just about a year and a half ago, so we are rapidly gearing up to be able to work throughout the county. I've been able to make great relationships with EASC. We're all interested in moving equity, bringing it to the forefront in Snohomish County.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Avianca Walker, Black for residents of Snohomish County, and it's an honor and privilege to be here today. In my other world, I also work at Everett Community College as the Associate Director of Recruitment, where I've also had the privilege of working in our Diversity and Equity Center, co-founding and co-chairing our Black Affinity group for a few years now. Thank you again for having me.
And Doug.
Yeah, so many accolades. You got me going last against all these people. Before I go, I want shout out to Annette and Katie for doing this whole Zoom thing. Like this is a I don't know if y'all can see it from my end, but the way that she's got it set up with like the panelists come out this way, and then they have the attendees on the side. They did their thing. Appreciate that. I'm Doug Rayford. I am the Racial and Social Justice Coordinator for the City of Linwood. I have been in this position since, way back. What is that? August? So I have been here for a little bit. City of Linwood, I am their first racial and social justice coordinator for the city. And so we are definitely working through it together. Everyone has a plan on what they think it should look like until until you actually start doing the work, and then things start changing and trying to figure out how things actually should be going, and what works best based on where everyone is on their journey, on their DEI journey, right? And so we're doing a lot of changes and making things around. We're doing surveys, and I hate that word. And I know other people are just, when they hear surveys, they cringe. And I feel you on it. And so hopefully it will be done soon, and we can move on to actually continue building relationships with our community agencies. And I think that's where the real work is building those relationships and sort of fixing relationships that may have been broken in the past. So that's a lot of what I plan on doing this year. So.
All right. Well, thank you all for the intros, and I think we should dive in. But before we do that, folks who are on here, if you could do me a favor and the panelists a favor and just simply comment what you think of equity. What does it mean to you? So in one word or two or a few or whatever phrasing you'd like to put in the chat, we'd love to just see some of the comments of when you think of equity, what it means. Folks, so we'll dive in here with some conversation. One question that I have, and I'll ask this of the full group, and we'll go in the same order that you introduced yourselves, just to have some sense of format. But the question is, why are discussions of diversity, equity, and inclusion so important to bring to the table right now? What are the consequences of ignoring it? So Annie, I'll let you think on that a little bit, and then dive in however you like.
This is one of those mornings when I should have had my Wheaties. It's gonna be fast and furious. I think the conversation has, at least for me, always been important, but in today's space, our current space, with everything that's going on in society, with the lack of civility, with the how quick people are to anger when we talk about equity, especially racial equity, I think it's a dangerous time, and that if we don't do something to change the narrative around equity and inclusion and the importance for us as a society, I think we're going to see a continued loss of lives, and that's on any given day.
All right, thank you, Annie. Avianca, any thoughts?
I completely agree with Annie. I think people's lives are at stake, and they've been at stake for a long time in this country. And I just think it's each generation's responsibility to do what they can to push the work forward. I think we owe it to our ancestors and elders that came before us, and we owe it to the youth who are coming up after us to just do the work that we have been assigned to do in regards to creating safety for everyone.
Excellent,
excellent. Doug, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm just gonna I echo what Anna and Avianca said already. I think DEI work is always important. With that said, I think the consequences of not doing this work is more dire now than it has been in some time. Maybe not all the time, but in our current time frame, I think it's more dire now that we have this work. And I mean, depending on the audience, the importance of the work or the lack of the work can mean different things and be important in different ways. It could be economic. It could be welcoming safe communities. I mean, there's so many different ways in which not doing the work can harm us as a people, can harm us as a country. Yeah, there's always a need for DEI.
Yeah. Yes, yes. I think I love the fact that each of you made it clear, loud and clear that this is about saving lives. And that should be more important than anything and how we engage. So if you're looking for a reason to engage, that is as big as any. I want to ask each of you, and this time I'm just going to throw it out and you can chime in as you wish. But how can we approach getting buy-in from colleagues or even leaders in an organization when developing DEI strategies? We know that this has to be in every system. It has to be in every walk of life. So can each of you just touch on that a little bit?
So for me, this is one of those tough, because buy-in suggests that you're interested. And so how do we bring people along who aren't interested? And what we've seen in society is when people aren't interested, it becomes a rush to draft laws that say we can't discuss this and we can't discuss that. And so I think you start with those who are interested and you bring them along and you help them develop their skills so that sort of each one reach back and grab one so that maybe they're closer to the person I can't get to. Maybe someone will listen to them. So I think the best thing we can do is take it slow. I think one of the other things that happens is everybody wants it fixed today. But as Doug mentioned earlier, everybody has their idea. We have to be on the same page if we're even going to be able to move this forward. Otherwise, we get caught in the, well, that's not how I say it. This is how I write. So we have to spend some time laying groundwork so that we're all speaking the same terms with the same meaning.
Very strong. Anyone else want to dive in on that question?
I think I think one thing that when I started doing this work and I was going around and asking mentors and people who have been doing this for a while, and I said, so what do I got to do? How do I do this equity and inclusion work? Where do I start? I want to make some changes. I want to show that I'm making changes. And they said, Doug, take it slow. It's a long process. What you have to really be focusing on right now is building those relationships. That's the key. Once you build those relationships, and especially for someone like me, I'm a racial and social justice coordinator. I am not a director, right? So the extent of the power that I have is limited in what I can make people do. And so a lot of it is building those relationships to make sure that they understand that we, like Annie said, that we all have like sort of the same goal. We have the same goal. Now we may have different thoughts on how to reach that goal, what the path is, but we all, at the end, I think for the most part, most of us, I mean, maybe some of us don't, but for the most part, we all have that same goal. And it's just making sure that they understand that I am not out there to hurt them. I'm not coming out in a malicious way, that I'm coming out there to say, hey, we all want to reach this goal. How can we do this together? And the relationship building, I think, is a really key part of that.
Avianca, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that Annie and Doug said. I think I would just add that if you, well, first of all, there are so many folks who are tasked within their organization as leading this work, and they're a team of one. And so I think if you're in an organization and you're aware of that and that person is you or it's not you, then I would just highly recommend that you reach out to that person and see what they need, what kind of support you could offer them, what kind of relationships you have where you could extend an introduction or support them in bridge building a connection with other groups that they're not connected to yet. If you have the privilege of doing this work on a team, which I have had the privilege of doing most of the time, I would say that humility is really key in knowing your strengths. I've definitely been parts of teams where I am better. I have good relationships, and so I work well as an ambassador for the team, being that person that Annie and Doug were talking about to go out and bring other people alongside us. But there are some people on the team who are just really good at like cheerleading and rallying the group who's already on board. And we all know that this work is a marathon and not a sprint. And so you need those cheerleaders and those people, but it sometimes doesn't work really well when you send your cheerleader out as an ambassador to folks who are not ready for that level of enthusiasm. So I would say humbly knowing what your strengths are. And if you have the, again, privilege of working on a team, discussing those with one another and deciding like who really is the best person for what we're trying to accomplish at this phase, because it is going to go slowly, like everyone has said.
Excellent, excellent. So I want to shift gears here and ask a question as to what's the biggest hurdle for you right now in doing this work that you see in our community and our business community? What's the biggest hurdle? And Doug, I know you are diving into this work. I do love that the city of Linwood has initiated and established putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak. I think that is largely important. But I ask each of you, what is the hurdle? What's the obstacle? What's in the way right now? Doug, go ahead, Annie.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think one of the biggest hurdles is how much fear, guilt, and shame people carry around this that keeps them blocked from moving forward, and that helping them get past that. I like to say guilt and shame does not serve. And so you have to help people figure out that the fear is an emotional thing, but it isn't, there's no danger in doing this, in moving towards being a more, excuse me, a more equitable society. And helping people understand a lot of fear is about loss. And in this work, there's no loss, only gain. If we are an equitable society, everybody rises. So helping them figure that out.
Anyone else want to touch? Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think to broaden it, I would say just really, I found having to meet people where they're at in their journey, in their DEI journey. And that may be that area of fear, but it could also be the area of where they've just gotten into the work and they're super excited and they think that they are all in, like, I want to do equity and inclusion. I am down for it. I'm reading books. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And in theory, they're ready, right? But then when you put them in front of some people of color, or there's a situation where money is involved and you need to find a consultant company to do something, and there's a large portion of money and you're like, I don't know if I can work with that person. Like I thought, I was like, they start coming up with reasons like, oh, I don't know if that's the right one because this person, right? And so, you got those people, and then you got the other people who are just like in there, but they're at this part in their journey where they've learned enough that they're super angry and want things to happen right now, but it's not, you know what I mean? And they're just, they don't, all they see is red, right? And so there's all of these people, and making sure that they're all self-aware of where they're at in their journey and helping to guide them so that they can be in a place where they're using that energy in a productive way. I think it has been somewhat of a challenge that I wasn't completely planning for when I started.
That was excellent. Avianca, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, I was trying to think of how to word this. I guess I would call it a fear of sorting. Just, I think this work again is long and hard. And there is a need for everybody to kind of just gather with their own group, for white folks to get together, for Black folks to get together in their affinity groups, and just like take a collective breath, because we are all learning. And when we're in a more diverse space, you have that tension of like wanting to say the right thing and wanting to not offend anyone, but also wanting to speak your truth. And so I think a lot of my work has been holding space, especially for Black people and African people who just need we need some time alone to just retreat and breathe and not be doing the work, but just to like have a cookout and laugh, and then come back to the work refreshed, because burnout is real and people get tired. And so, but I've had a lot of pushback of people being like, no, we have to stick together. If we're gonna get anywhere, we all need to be together. And it's like, no, we're gonna come back together, but it's also okay to take a break and go into our respective camps. And especially if you need to hash something out or you are struggling with something, like, it's not always comfortable to do your deepest learning in front of a mixed audience. And so for even white students that I work with, I strongly advocate that they get their own space sometimes, because it's like, I don't want them to have to worry about offending the BSU, but I want them to work through and talk about what they're learning, because that is how we all grow. So just don't be afraid of giving people their space.
Excellent. All of those comments are really amazing and insightful. I would like to ask the audience to again go to the chat. And what I'd like to ask you to do, if you feel comfortable in doing this, is share with us what your fear is in this work, in this space. What is your fear? And however you like to describe that, just throw it into the chat. And then I want to throw it back to our panelists and ask, in the business community, can we speak to why it's important that we get this right? Why it's important that we have strategy? I know Annie and several others on this call realize that we have been working on what we're calling rolling out Snow Code, which is our DEI effort to engage not only business CEOs, but also education, other institutions, and also just citizens in the county. We really want to make sure that we're engaging everyone in this space. So Snow Code is actually coming up on the 23rd, will be February 23rd. This is the first. I realized that today is February 1st. At any rate, the 23rd of this month, we're going to have our first large meeting on Snow Code. So if you are interested at all, also put your comment in the chat, and Katie and Annette will get you again. But again, put your fears in the chat for us. And then for each of you on the panel, how do we get this right for businesses? Why is it important that businesses get this right? Why should they be engaged? Why should they put their money where their mouth is? Can you speak to that? And Avianca, I'm going to go to you first, because you've kind of batted clean up a little bit on some of these. So you're on deck. You're first.
All right. Yeah, I think, Black Snohomish County is a directory of local Black businesses. And so I think one of the reasons that we need to get this right is because we want to see more diverse businesses within our own community succeed. And when we have larger, more established businesses that have been in our community for a long time, supporting this work, reaching a hand out to these newer entrepreneurs, creatives, and business owners that are coming into our community, and welcoming them in and sharing resources, we're going to encourage them to stay. And we're also supporting their families and their livelihood. And so again, it goes back to people's lives are at stake. And so your business supporting this work is a way of making our community safe for everyone, and everyone getting lifted up.
Okay, just jump in, folks. Any thoughts? That was excellent.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I can say from the city perspective, and from former international student advisor, educator perspective, it's important. I don't know about the anyone else on this call who has a works or lives in a small city, but whenever in a city, it's always sort of just like, well, we're just worried about what's in our little bubble, and we need to realize that what we do is important to everybody. What happens outside of the bubble affects all of us, and sort of when we're looking at our businesses, we need to have a diverse group of businesses, because that is the world we live in, is a diverse world, and that's what our businesses should look like as well. And we should want that for our families and neighbors to have access to that. It also is important for the cities to really push that initiative forward. And that's part of, looking at procurement and looking at and making sure that when you work with businesses, that you're making sure that those businesses are diverse, and that you're providing support and education and grants and those types of things for those businesses who have, historically been pushed aside and not given the opportunities or the loans or what have you to have those businesses in our neighborhoods. And so I think we would see a much more welcoming, economically developed city or society if we had a more diverse businesses in them.
Thank you, Doug. All right, Annie, take it away.
Well, the easiest answer is the bottom line dollar. If our world is changing, and if you're not moving with it, you will be left behind. People can choose where they shop. Excuse me. This is what happens when I get up too early in the morning. People can, choose how they spend their money. And if we are going to be impactful, we have to recognize who we are serving. I also think that if you look at Snohomish County, the statistics show it has become extremely diverse, and you need to be aware of who you're serving and welcome them in if you're going to stay in this business or in a business.
Those are pointed words, and I feel like they're right on point. I think that's awesome. Thank you, Annie, for those words. I see we have a lot of comments in the chat about fear. And, I think, first of all, I appreciate everyone being willing to share those thoughts. There's a lot of struggle there to just be honest about how you feel and feel that you can safely do so. As you all have engaged us with this. Let's talk a little bit about DEI initiatives. So when you have a DEI initiative, Doug, how do we measure that success? How do we say that this initiative has been successful? What are the measurements for success?
I mean, the most common go-to is community response, right? If the community is responding well to the initiative and they feel like it has addressed an issue that they, and because hopefully prior to doing this initiative that you have gotten input and feedback from the community on what that initiative needs to be, and now you are creating an action plan that is pushing forward that initiative that the community wants, right? And then hopefully the community is having a positive response to that initiative. But it to some degree it depends on what the initiative is and what the goal of that initiative is. Because it could be something tangible. It could be some like increase in funding from the initiative, or something that's more substantial in terms of just is the community feeling more welcomed and safer in contacting the city or working with certain departments in the city. And so it really depends on the initiative but those community indicators will fluctuate depending on what it is. But at the end of the day, I think it all depends on how the community responds to that initiative.
Excellent, excellent. Ladies, any other thoughts on that question? How do we measure it?
I think that a true measure of if we're being successful is we will see more community involvement. I know everybody is always, why won't people come to this? Or why don't they take part in that? And a large part of it is they don't feel a sense of welcome to come to us, right? And so I think that will be one measure, is that we will see more community engagement. I also think that from an education standpoint, we will see our students of color starting to succeed. We know they can when they are supported, when they are welcomed, when they are included. We see great success. And so we will start to hear measures about student success and not identify these students aren't being as successful.
Yeah, I agree with that, Annie. And I would just add and kind of elaborate and say retention. I think if our initiatives are successful, then we will retain the new businesses that open up within our community. They'll not only retain, but will grow and have more businesses. And then same when we're working, again, like Annie said, with our students, or at the college with our faculty and staff, if all of our Black employees, if they're coming in, but then turning right around and leaving again, and we're not talking to them and finding out why, we have a revolving door. And same thing goes for our students. Then it's a pretty good sign that our initiative is not working. Because if things are working and we're creating a safe space for people, then people are going to stay there and they're going to thrive within that space. And you're going to see them move up also. So when we're talking about employees, it's not just good enough to retain them and keep them in the same role if they have aspirations of moving up.
All right, excellent. I think we can continue down this path a little bit and talk a little bit about what advice you would give people who want to drive equity and inclusion. So the folks on this call, as you can see, there's quite a bit of comments on their fear. So obviously we have a lot of work to do. So can you give some thoughts, what your advice would be to these folks on DEI work, how to play their part? Annie, you want to lead off?
Sure. I think Doug touched on this. Before you can drive it, you have to do your work. You have to know where your sensitivities are, because I will guarantee you something's going to happen that will trigger you if you haven't done your work, and that will do harm. If you are triggered and you get upset or angry, that will not move the cause. So I think, I've been in this for a long time, and I still study, go to conferences, and I can't encourage people enough to find a trusted resource, someone that you can have that honest conversation with, right? I've seen, kind of glancing at the chat a little bit, where folks are a little concerned about being that honest. I would encourage folks to be honest, because it's only through honesty that we can break down the barriers. And if we're holding back because we're afraid it might hurt someone's feeling, I like to tell people we're pretty astute. We know when you're not. So it's not building the relationship anyway. So I would challenge folks to learn, know themselves, and engage with someone to learn from them.
Well, I'm gonna shift gears here and not I think Annie, you kind of nipped that in the bud there, but what I'd like to ask is, Avianca, there's some comments in the chat, and I think there was one that just popped up about, let's see, I just want to make sure I get this right for you. I'm gonna kind of put you on the spot here, but I think there was a comment about limiting the capabilities around DEI, that there's a fear is limiting thinking around DEI, and a way that excludes groups who should be represented in those efforts and at the forefront of work toward equity. Avianca, any thoughts on that?
I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, so they're just saying there's a fear around not putting.
It's actually Whitney. Whitney saying her fear is limiting thinking around DEI in a way that excludes groups who should be represented in those efforts to be at the forefront. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that just all goes back to humility and relationship building. So I think part of it is, again, knowing your strengths. And if you know that you don't have the relationships within your organizations with some of the groups that are coming to mind that you would like to see represented, then it's being humble enough to go to somebody who does and ask them to partner with you in reaching out to those folks. And then I think it goes a long way just to tell folks you don't know. Like, it goes a long way just to say, hey, we want to have this conversation. We don't know everyone who should be invited. So I very frequently, we have just a public posting tool at Everett Community College. And it's like, just invite everyone then. And then folks can self-select in and you can make sure that you include people that way. And you can just be honest and say, we may not know everyone who needs to be at the table, but we definitely don't want to miss you if you want to be there. So please join us. And so I think that's a really good way to approach that.
Thank you. Thank you for tackling that. And Doug, I guess I'll ask you a follow-up question. When you think of this work, it seems as though people might have an image as to who's supposed to do it. And that's kind of what Avianca's alluding to there with her comment. What are your thoughts on that? Who's supposed to do this work? And is there some kind of, are Black people supposed to lead DEI efforts? That's my question.
I think if a Black person is interested in doing the work, they should be allowed to do the work. I think there is what's the word? You don't want to put it into a situation where there's someone who is not familiar with DEI work or a certain culture or community, and rather than trying to put in the legwork themselves, they put it on that person, right? So you don't want someone saying, well, I'm really interested in Native American culture, and I know someone who's Native American. So rather than actually like doing the research and understanding things on my own first, I'm just going to go and ask them a whole bunch of questions and take up their time and put them on the spot to do the work for me. So I think there's a balance, right? I think you should, like Avianca said, I think you should talk to people and get that. But I think you also need to take the time to do the work yourself and on yourself and doing that research before you put it on someone else. And I think that's part of figuring out what your role is, right? And I think that's also something Avianca said, is like sort of knowing what lane you're in, like knowing like what's my role in all of this DEI work, right? Like, and so once you sort of become self-aware, like Annie said, and you know your role, like Avianca said, then I think you have a better understanding of what you should be doing in this DEI work. And so that's just me, much like most men, building off of the women before me who have said things.
Okay. Well, ladies, I want to make sure I give you a chance to answer that question as well. So, and I'll just ask it again. Should Black people be leading DEI work? Who should be doing this work? So Annie or Avianca, want to dive in on that, or?
Now we're both being polite and just waiting. Yes, if I agree with Doug, if they are ready to do the work, if they have background in the work, right, lived experience is not necessarily enough to be able to do the work. And I think often we look to people of color and assume our lived experience translates to our ability to educate around this. And that is absolutely not true. I don't think this work can be done without including us, because the folks that are impacted are people of color, right? So you'd have to engage with people of color to get, as Doug said, what is it that you want, right? But I think there's room for a lot of folks to be doing this work. I think it's all of our work at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree with what both Annie and Doug said, and I think it's also important in our community in Snohomish County to recognize when you are working with Black folks, just the experience of being Black in Snohomish County. Unlike many other communities, we don't have a brick and mortar Black community in this county. And so especially for Black and African people who are new to the area, it can take a little while to get your bearings. And so while they're in that process of getting their bearings, if you're bombarding them to lead equity work in this community where they're like, where are the Black people even at? Like, I'm still trying to find them. Then you could be putting an undue burden on them that really isn't helpful and is not going to set them up for success. So just, I think, being aware, again, of what is available to the people of color in the community that you want to pull in, specifically the Black folks, if that's who you're talking about, and how they might be impacted by the specifics of Snohomish County and what we do and do not have to offer is really important.
Thank you. Thank you all for tackling that question. I do want to ask that our audience, as we're getting down to the wire here, if you would start to throw some questions into the chat for our panelists here, and then we'll try to sift through some of those questions. And then at the end of this, around 9:22 or 23-ish, we'll kind of do some closing remarks as well. So just kind of giving everyone a understanding of where we're headed here. I'll ask an additional question while we wait for comments to come into the chat. And that question is tied to our other areas of use. So we know this is Economic Alliance is largely focused on the business community, but we realize that there are other factions to that. Can each of you speak to a specific place? So it could be education, or it could be in some other walk of life that you feel the work is needed to be expressed deeper. Annie, I know you mentioned education, so I'd love if you would be willing to start off with that. And then I see we're going to have a few questions in the comment piece. So go ahead, Annie, take it away.
So we're all aware of numerous things that are happening in Snohomish County and throughout this country that are impacting our youth. We have young children whose futures are ended way too soon because they can't take the bullying and the exclusion and the name calling, and suicide has become an option for folks. And we need to be very concerned in our respective places, because our youth are our future. And so when I speak to education, it's a tragedy that the same names that I was called, we are still calling our kids today. The same way we dismiss them in the classroom, they are still being dismissed. The same accusations of you're threatening or you're angry or are happening to our kids today. And in today's society, it is much more dangerous because of social media. It's a bombardment, and we need to be concerned about that as a society.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And I think this is kind of the direction that we need to go in this conversation, is to just be very, very candid about what's happening. So, Avianca, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, I would say your faith community. I personally am a Christian, and I know where I've seen some of the most gains is where we've done this work within the church, because you can tie it to people's moral belief system and their internal compass. And so I think then they're coming from a place of seeing the necessity. I know we personally, my husband and I are the only or not, that's not true anymore, actually, which we're really happy about. But for a while, we were the only Black couple in our congregation who were not interracial. And we have a youth group that's 50% Black. And so we led a Bible study talking about the history of racism within the church for the adults before we started volunteering with the youth group, because we, again, want to support those young people. We want them to see people who look like themselves. We want them to understand why we believe what we believe, and make the connection between what we say we believe and how we feel that translates into this DEI work and how we should treat people. And again, when we talk about measuring success and retention, I think we grew the Bible study and had people who did not even attend our church asking to come and be a part of it and to learn. And we've done the same with our youth group, where we now have Black youth coming to our youth group because we have Black leaders there, and so they want to have those connections and see themselves reflected within that faith community as well. So just bloom where you're planted.
All right, all right. Doug, you want to add any more to this?
I would just say for me, it is a lot of focus has been around we're doing a community justice center, aka a new jail, and so a lot of the discussions that I'm having is around, what does policing look like in Linwood? What do the courts look like? How do we understand misdemeanor crime? And sort of how the Linwood police, the judge, and our elected officials, the mayor or the council, what is their views on these things? How does this work within them, and how are we educating the community on the role of government and police and municipalities in general?
All right. All right. Thank you all for doing that. We did have one question in the chat, and it was centered around how do you navigate difficult conversations? So I think that is something that we all would love some advice on. So Avianca, if you're willing to lead off on this one, how do we navigate difficult conversations? Any advice for the audience?
Yeah, I think a few things. The first is, again, just goes back to relationships. So who's having the conversation and what is it about is an important place to start. If it's a one-on-one conversation, I think, again, both Annie and Doug have spoken to this as well. Going in with honesty and humility is very important. The other person is likely going to be able to tell if you're being dishonest or holding back. And so that's not necessarily going to get the relationship gains that you want or desire. And then again, I'm just echoing what's already been said, but doing that work first before you go into the conversation of unpacking your own biases, your own fears, your own anxieties, because those are also going to come up. And so if you can kind of process those ahead of time and be connected with how you process, are you a verbal processor? Do you need to write it out? Do you need time alone? Do you need time with other folks? Before you go into that conversation, do the self-care work that you need to do to show up and be present and be humble and honest.
Thank you, thank you. And since we don't have a lot of time, I'm gonna jump to another question. And then I think this might be our last question, and I'll allow each of you, if you're willing, to give some closing remarks, just so we can give ourselves a little time. But this question in the chat, I can't see the whole entire thing, but I think it has to do with a specific faction of our community, the Asian American and Pacific Islander faction of our community, not being at the table. And how do we engage or approach a way to make this better is the question. How do we bring those folks into the conversation, into the forefront, as we had a question earlier on this. So I'll jump to Doug and then Annie and then Avianca if you want to close out on that question, please.
For me, working with the Asian American and or Pacific Islander communities, and I separate them because in the work that I've done till now, the Northwest, they prefer that it be separate. Those are two separate groups, right? And I think even within those groups, there are subgroups, and so you don't want to sort of lump everyone together. But with that said, I think there's a need to understand the culture and perspective of those groups, and understanding that, like we've sort of been touched on throughout this whole conversation, is that we all sort of have that same goal, and those groups do as well. And the question is, how do they see reaching that goal? Because of cultural differences, depending on where they're coming from. Are they first generation? Are they, like what are they bringing in sense of like who their identity, and understanding that to better understand how we can do this work together, so it's beneficial to everybody involved.
Excellent. Annie, Avianca, do you want to chime in on that, or you feel like Doug knocked it out?
I'll just quickly add that AAPI folks in our community here in Snohomish County are doing some amazing work. And there are some folks who are like multi-generational powerhouses within that community doing this DEI work. So if you are having trouble bringing them to the table in your specific context, again, it just might go back to you specifically not having that relationship or the connections. Again, we don't have, like many other communities, a brick and mortar Asian community either. So it can be hard to get connected or to know who's doing what sometimes. And so it might just take asking or reaching out to folks. The community college is a great place to start because we have student clubs who've been supported by community members for decades now at this point. Or if there's anything I think that we can do to help connect you to the folks who are leading that work in that community already. I think it's always important to understand that that's probably happening. And if you don't know who is doing it, it might not be because it's not occurring. It might just because it's not occurring on your radar. And so you need to make the connections to find out where that's happening.
And Annie?
Super quick. I think the first thing we have to do is recognize that AAPI doesn't actually represent. We've lumped a lot of folks into a very small name. And so we have to do the work of disaggregating and recognizing that I'm Chinese, I'm Japanese, I'm Filipino. We have different cultures in different ways. And so the invite has to be to the different groups. And so I think that is work that we all need to be doing. And then real quick on the difficult conversation question, I wanted to add that one thing, if you think the conversation is going to be difficult, it will be. And so reframing in your head that this is going to be a conversation from which I grow and learn. And that changes how you move into the conversation. So some of the tension and stress doesn't go in with you.
Thank you. Thank you. I see there were some comments in the chat about who is represented on the panel here. So I think I can do us all the justice of expressing the theme here today, and why this panel looks like it looks. So if everyone's aware, I mentioned that it's February 1st, and it's Black History Month, folks. I just want to say that. And so I'm excited about the fact that we were able to pull together this panel, but I think we need to make sure that we are diversifying our panels going forward and representing multiple factions of our community. And I think we are totally hopeful that folks who are on this chat, if you have some expertise to bring to a future coffee chat, please feel free to engage myself, Annette, or even Katie. We are always looking for themes to bring forward. And so this is just one of them that is the kickoff of an amazing month, folks. It's February 1st, and I'll say it again, it's Black History Month. So this is just a great opportunity for us to engage on DEI work, and I really appreciate you all joining us. I'm going to give each of you 1 minute to give kind of a closing remark. So Doug, you're going to go last because we're going to let the ladies go first. So Avianca, you have the first crack at it, and then Annie, please follow up, and then Doug. Thank you, Avianca.
Yeah, thank you again, Gary, for having us. Thank you, everyone, for being here on this bright and early morning. And I think I'll just close by saying, again, this work is a marathon and not a sprint. And so the importance of having a community around you to support you in your growth, the importance of being self-aware and knowing, when it's time to go out and make those connections and do the extroverted side of the work, and when it's time to just hunker down with a book, do some deeper learning, some writing, some journaling. It takes all of it, and it takes all of us. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your commitment to the work. And we just encourage you to keep pushing forward. Happy Black History Month.
Right, thank you, Annie.
I should never have to follow Avianca. First, thank you, Gary, for doing this and for recognizing Black History Month. I think one of the things that we, people engaged in this work, people of color, have to be careful is that we don't create fights amongst ourselves when we don't have to, because one of the things that is going to be necessary is all of us working together to move this work forward. And so I think that's what I would encourage folks to do, is to, sometimes it'll be another group that's having a conversation. I can show up and learn without being on the panel. So I would encourage everyone to come with an open mind and with a willingness to recognize we're not sliding. The focus today for February is Black folk, right? So I think that's the thing, is we have to have thick skin in this work. And I appreciate you, Gary, addressing it honestly, right? So we had something on the table that needed to be addressed, and that's how we move forward together.
Thank you, Annie. Doug, you want to follow that?
I know, like Annie's talking about having to follow Avianca. I gotta follow both of them. It's like following Busta Rhymes at a concert. You don't want to be the next one to go. It's not good. Yeah, I agree with everything that everyone has said. Gary, I also appreciate you just there's a question that we just talk about it. I get the feeling you're not from the Northwest.
I am not.
I moved out here, and I feel like that has been the biggest thing, is when we're trying to have these conversations, there's a lot of passive aggressiveness. And I think if people would just sit down and you have to be willing to be in an uncomfortable space and be uncomfortable in the conversation, if and when that happens, and just be okay with that, because it's going to happen. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're at in your E&I journey, you'll never know everything, and you'll always have to learn. And like Annie and Avianca said, you know, sometimes it's just, you have to be humbled and just and learn from it, and be better the next time. And so don't be afraid to do the work and to make mistakes. Just do it intentionally and thoughtfully, and make those changes when they need to happen, and don't be afraid to acknowledge it.
You all are amazing, and I hope we can secure you for our goal of a huge event later this year, which we are tying to these snow code efforts. And so we're hoping to do the first DEI forum and awards event in October. So each of you would be amazing to have there. So we're going to try our best to pencil you in if possible. Well, folks, we are at the conclusion of an amazing conversation, and I want to thank our amazing mayor from Mount Lake Terrace for even engaging us how we were there, and what she said. It pushed us to have a stronger conversation, even in this space when we had already had a robust conversation. So I think every comment is necessary to move us forward, and so I appreciate that. Folks, February 8th at 8:30 a.m. We have welcoming and supporting Afghan arrivals. And so as you see, we are really hopeful that we can continue to bring you coffee chats that are focused and direct and to the point. So I appreciate you all if you're willing to join us for that. I want to thank our panelists, Annie, Doug, and Avianca, for an amazing presentation today. And you know what we have to do right now, folks. If you're still on with us, let's go to our big share screen. And if you have a coffee or a drink or some water, let's go ahead and just display our joy for drink. Let me grab my drink real quick. I am being healthy today. I got water, Aquafina. Look, folks, have an amazing day. Speak your truth. Be amazing, folks. Share that light that you have, but also think of diversity, equity, and inclusion. All right, have an amazing day. Take care.